Hey, happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our questions and answers for this Tuesday, March 31st. New location, as you can see, this is my home office. And of course, no home office would be complete without, I'll go this way, without Mr. Teddy Roosevelt in any home office, and also a Pirates of Penzance poster. So, this is your questions and answers, and I am just so excited by how many questions we've got. Remember, some of you, I gave you guys a challenge or a little mini assignment to post a comment on the Google Classroom videos. So there's several of you did that, and I hope that more and more of you are going to get more engaged in discussion with us as we go through this week. With that being said, if I don't answer your question in this video, go check back with your question on Google Classroom, because I may have put a comment down on your question. But let's get started and look at a question that an 8th grader had talking about the Great Depression. And this 8th grader asks, how did Prohibition affect the Great Depression? Well, Prohibition ends in 1933, so about 3 years into the Great Depression. The Volstead Act, which was the 18th Amendment, was passed. And so for about a little less than 2 decades, the sale of alcohol was illegal in the United States. And then with the 21st Amendment, ironically, the Prohibition was ended by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. There were a couple reasons why. Number one, basically the Prohibition did nothing. It really did not work. Organized crime was extremely prevalent during the Prohibition era, as well as you have several people flaunting the law with moonshiners. The other thing is that Roosevelt realized that they could get a lot of money with alcohol sales. So as they go through this, they said, we can make a lot of money through sale of alcohol and taxing on those. Those are called excise taxes on liquor. And so the Great Depression was a little less dry during this time period because the Prohibition Act was canceled. Okay. Question from a 6th grader. Why was Iraq one of the major sources, I think they're supposed to say sources, major water sources in the Middle East? Well, as I said in our videos, the easy answer for that is because it has 2 major rivers that flow through it. That is the Tigris and the Euphrates. So if you look at your maps of the Middle East, you'll see 2 big rivers that flow through it, Tigris and Euphrates. In an area of deserts, rivers are very key. Another question from an 8th grader. How did people live in their houses if they're filled with 6 feet of dust? This is coming back to our Dust Bowl question. Short answer is they didn't. That's why they became Okies, and they're moving. Can't really live in a house full of dust, can you? Well, I can. My house is very dusty right now. I haven't cleaned it today. But if you go on ConnectEd, you can see a lot of images through your social studies textbook. 6th graders, since you guys don't have access, 6th and 7th graders, if you guys go to just Google the Dust Bowl, you'll see a lot of images of those. Okay, another question from a 6th grader. What is a military dictatorship? So this is one term that has a lot of definitions to it, and there are several ways that you can define this. Basically, it's a dictatorship where the person in charge is the head of the military, or is a military official. So, for instance, there used to be a guy in Libya named Gaddafi, who was a colonel, and he was in charge. That's a definition of a military dictatorship. Saddam Hussein, who was the former dictator of Iraq, was a army officer before he took over in a coup. I believe he was a major. Might have been a colonel. Can't remember. You'll often spot dictatorships because they're always parading around in military uniform. Okay? What's interesting about the word dictator comes from Rome. and it actually wasn't a bad thing to the Romans. A dictator was a office that they gave. It was a title that was given to a person when enemies were at the Roman gates and they needed someone to fight and save the Republic. And so you were expected to fight, and then you were expected to give up your dictatorship. That is, of course, not how it works today. Another question for a sixth grader. What was the relationship like between Iran and Iraq after the war? I'm assuming you're saying after their war. It was complicated. After the war, it was very hostile, and it continued to be hostile. Of course, after several years, those tensions continue to boil over every day. Remember that Iraq and Iran are both Shia Muslim countries, so that means that they have a lot of in common. And so the governments of Iraq and Iran are friendlier today than they have been in the past because there is a Shia majority government in Iraq. And this is kind of counter to the United States, who are not so friendly with Iran, and vice versa. So I would not call it a friendship, but it is a lot cooler than it was before. Okay. Another sixth grader. Do women have a lot of rights or only a few? If so, what are they not allowed to do? I'm assuming you're talking about in the Middle East. I always like it when you guys are a little bit more specific, but women, just like in any country, it depends on the country. So in the Middle East, it is a wide variety of areas. Some places like Kuwait, they're allowed to vote. They're allowed to drive cars. They're allowed to go to movie theaters and school. Or you could be in some parts of like Afghanistan where women are required to wear burqas, which cover their face, and they're forced to live at home. They can't leave without a male escort. Saudi Arabia, women just got the ability to drive cars. Then you have like places like Israel where women live very similar lives to lives in the United States, and the same in some other nations that are nearby Israel. It just really depends. The Quran, which is the Muslim Holy Bible, has a lot of different rules and regulations for how women are supposed to dress. However, there are different interpretations of how women are supposed to act according to the Quran and according to different groups. And so, let's see. This is the most requested question. What are the Kurds and who are the Kurds? And who are the Kurds is the correct form of that question because the Kurds are a people. The Kurds live in western, let's see, looking at my map without looking at a map in my head. They live in northern Syria, northern Iraq, and eastern Turkey. And they are an ethnic group and a religious group of Muslims that have lived in that region for a very long time. What's interesting, they have kind of dotted throughout history. A very famous Crusader general who fought against the Crusaders, his name was Saladin. He was a Kurd. The Kurds have been in the news for a long time, ever since the Syrian civil war, because they have been allies with the United States. They have fought against both the Syrian government and as well as the ISIS terrorist cell. They are a group that is, number one, trying to protect their homeland, but the majority of them want a free and independent, what's called Kurdistan. It would be a country of ethnic Kurds. So it's an ethnic group, but also a religious group. And the Kurds have kind of what's called a semi-autonomous region in Iraq, where they can kind of do their own thing, but they're still kind of under the control of the Iraqi government. And it's kind of one of those things that it's a little hard to talk about because we just don't know with everything that's going on in the Middle East how that's going to end. What's kind of interesting to note, I think, is that with all of the fighting against ISIS. The first group that really made a stand and fought against ISIS and was successful in fighting against ISIS were the Kurds. So they are very important to the story of the Syrian civil war. Okay, got a few last questions. Another sixth grader asks, is Mecca the capital of Saudi Arabia or just a city? Mecca is not the capital of Saudi Arabia. Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia, which is in the middle of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. It's in the middle of a desert. But Mecca is the spiritual capital of Islam. One thing in Islam is that there is a holy site in Mecca. And there are two very important functions if you are a Muslim. Number one, you are to pray 5 times a day. And no matter where you are in the world, you have to face Mecca while you pray. And that is where, if you ever seen a Muslim pray, maybe on TV or in real life, that's where they get down on the carpet and pray. And the way they're pointing is very important because they're pointing to Mecca. Mecca is also the spot where the Prophet Muhammad grew up and lived, so it's a very holy site. So in Mecca, also one requirement of Islam is that if you are physically able to, and you're also financially able to, you have to go to the holy site in Mecca and walk around it. If you ever look up an image of Mecca, you'll see this huge structure where thousands and thousands of Muslims go around the structure every day. It is one of the holiest. It is the holiest site in Islam. What was Operation Desert Storm? From another sixth grader. Operation Desert Storm was an attack by the United States and a coalition of both NATO and other allies who were attempting to take Kuwait back from Saddam Hussein. So Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait in 1991, occupied it, and then the Operation Desert Storm was the counterattack by the United States. And it was a massively successful counterattack. Basically, within 6 weeks, the Iraqi army was defeated by the primarily U.S. coalition forces, but there were other nations that fought with the United States. And that was one of the major wars of the 90s before the War on Terror conflicts. 2 questions from a sixth grader. One I've already answered, which is the relationship between Iran and Iraq today. And number 1, why would Saddam Hussein want to go to war with another colony? Well, it wasn't a colony, it was a nation. While he was still broke from the Iran-Iraq war. It's actually a very interesting question, which is why I wanted to read it in its entirety. Because Saddam Hussein went to war with Kuwait because he was broke. Kuwait owned all of the debt, a vast majority of the debt that Iraq had. They had loaned a bunch of money. And Saddam, being kind of the crazy madman that he was, he said, hey, Kuwait, why don't you forgive all the loans that I have against you? And naturally, Kuwait says, no, you have to pay all that. We gave you millions and millions of dollars. And so, since Kuwait was a small little territory, Saddam thought, I could just conquer it. But then Operation Desert Storm happens, and he is defeated. And looking through my notes, I want to make sure, and I think, yep, that is all the questions that we had from the other ones. For today, if you're watching this video today, if you have if you asked a question, good on you. You followed my instructions. Here's your next instruction. I want you guys, if you still have questions, keep asking them. But if you have a specific topic video, it does not even have to deal with anything in the specific history subject that you have. If you would like me to talk about something from history that you are really curious about, comment below from this video and I'll make a special episode tomorrow evening and post it for you. Okay? So I could be making 20 videos tomorrow, or I could be just making my regular ones. But if you have something specific that you want to learn about, comment below about history. I'll hope to see you guys with all your interactions tomorrow. Bye-bye.